This moment isn't just about art. It's not just about one diocese, or even one country. It's about the Church's witness in a world desperate for meaning, order, and beauty. When churches are treated as exhibition halls, when sacred imagery is reduced to metaphor, irony, or shock value, something in the soul of the Church suffers. The faithful do not go to Mass to be challenged by modern art. They go to encounter Christ. They go to weep, to pray, to adore. They go to step outside the chaos of the world and into the order of heaven. When that line is blurred, confusion grows. Reverence withers, and souls are lost. The faithful are not reacting out of ignorance. They are reacting out of love, a love for what the Church has always known, that beauty is not subjective whim, but objective transcendence. That sacred space is not merely a cultural canvas, but a dwelling place of God. If leadership fails to grasp this, if it instead embraces ambiguity under the guise of relevance, then the Church does not merely lose her aesthetic. She loses her witness. And when the Church loses her witness, the world loses its anchor. In this critical hour, attention returns to the Holy Father himself, Pope Leo XIV. His papacy, still in its early stages, has already revealed a set of priorities through recent episcopal appointments and administrative decisions. Observers are watching carefully. Will the Vienna appointment be a reflection of continuity with his predecessors, or a marked departure? It's important to remember that prior to his election, Pope Leo XIV held a powerful post within the Roman Curia, overseeing the very dicastery that evaluates bishops worldwide. He knows the system intimately. The names now surfacing are not strangers to him. They are individuals he has previously encountered, studied, and possibly even vetted. That makes the current silence from the Vatican all the more weighty. It implies that this is not a matter of oversight or bureaucratic delay. Rather, it suggests deliberation, and perhaps internal tension, as the Pope navigates competing factions within the Church, all eager to shape the future. Some speculate that Pope Leo XIV is weighing more than just the local dynamics of Vienna. He may be considering what message this appointment will send to the broader world. Will he affirm a path of traditional renewal, or will he lean toward cultural accommodation? His decision may echo far beyond Austria. It could be a defining moment of his pontificate. What makes this moment especially fraught is the identity of the man currently holding the keys of Peter, Pope Leo XIV. Before becoming pope, Leo served as prefect of the dicastery for bishops, the very Vatican department responsible for vetting and recommending episcopal appointments across the globe. He knows the players, he knows the dossiers, and most of all, he knows what kind of church he wants to build, which is why every new appointment he makes is seen not as routine, but as a message. The Vienna appointment was originally expected shortly after Schönborn's retirement in January. But now, as summer approaches, no successor has been announced. The delay is not just procedural. Some analysts suggest it reflects internal debate, or perhaps hesitation from Rome in the face of mounting public concern. Glettler's possible promotion has sparked widespread reactions, and not all of them are celebratory. Independent Catholic outlets, traditionalist bloggers, and lay prayer groups have begun to organize, hoping to make their voices heard before a decision becomes final. It's a rare case where art, theology, and leadership intersect in ways that touch on the Church's very self-understanding. Is this delay a sign of reconsideration, or simply Vatican caution at work? Whatever the answer, Vienna waits. And so does the wider Catholic world. As the Church in Austria approaches a pivotal decision, we're reminded of the quiet strength that comes through prayerful discernment. This story isn't just about Vienna. It's about the entire body of Christ. What we honor in our sacred spaces, how we lead our dioceses, and who we entrust with spiritual care. All of it matters. Let us remain anchored in hope, not the empty kind, but the kind rooted in truth, beauty, and reverence. Whether you're in a grand cathedral or a humble country chapel, the call remains the same: to adore Christ, to defend what is sacred, and to walk in the light. As always, thank you for joining us here at Southern Gospel, where faith meets clarity and tradition meets truth. Please like, share, and subscribe to help us keep producing these faith-centered stories that matter. Until next time, may the peace of Christ be with you and your family. In the quiet corridors of Vienna's Catholic life, a significant change is now underway. The long-serving and often discussed Cardinal Christoph Schönborn has officially retired from his role as Archbishop of Vienna. This isn't just a change in title. It's a moment that signals a turning point for one of Europe's most symbolic and historically charged dioceses. With Schönborn's departure, the seat of Vienna stands vacant, a rare and important moment in Catholic governance. For now, a temporary administrator has been appointed to oversee daily affairs. But beneath the surface, a quiet storm is gathering. Speculation is swirling about who might become the next Archbishop of Vienna. Among the names being quietly passed around is that of Bishop Hermann Glettler, a figure whose past decisions and public expressions have raised concern among many Catholic commentators. To understand the weight of this potential appointment, one has to first recognize the significance of Vienna itself. This archdiocese isn't just a pastoral territory. It's a spiritual, cultural, and political bellwether. What happens here echoes far beyond Austria's borders. And so, when a controversial figure emerges as a frontrunner, it naturally raises questions. What direction is the Church heading under Pope Leo XIV? Is this a moment of reform, of continuity, or something altogether different? These questions are not abstract. They come at a time of deep reflection and tension within global Catholicism. And Vienna, it seems, has once again become a stage where all of it is playing out. Reports from Austria suggest that Bishop Hermann Glettler, currently serving in the Diocese of Innsbruck, is under serious consideration for the Archbishop's chair. But it's not just his name on the shortlist that has drawn attention. It's the legacy he carries, one marked by bold liturgical experiments and provocative use of sacred space. Glettler's tenure in Innsbruck has been characterized by a very modern vision of church engagement. Among his most discussed actions has been the installation of contemporary artworks inside churches, pieces which, for some, represent creative evangelization, but for others, a deep betrayal of the sacred. One especially controversial work appeared during Lent. A transparent cloth featuring what was described as a pig's heart, presented as a reinterpretation of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. For many Catholics, this was not just confusing, it was offensive, a desecration masked as dialogue. Such installations have sparked recurring protests, prayer rallies, and online debates across Catholic platforms. Yet Bishop Glettler has defended his choices, saying that art must challenge the viewer and provoke reflection. He's even co-authored a book with a non-Christian religious leader promoting interfaith unity in times of global distress. His supporters praise him as visionary and pastoral. His critics warn that his aesthetic vision dilutes Catholic identity and opens the door to spiritual confusion. And now, he might soon be the spiritual head of Vienna, a place where liturgical decisions can influence the tone of European Catholicism for a generation. What makes this moment especially fraught is the identity of the man currently holding the keys of Peter, Pope Leo XIV. Before becoming pope, Leo served as prefect of the dicastery for bishops, the very Vatican department responsible for vetting and recommending episcopal appointments across the globe. He knows the players, he knows the dossiers, and most of all, he knows what kind of church he wants to build, which is why every new appointment he makes is seen not as routine, but as a message. The Vienna appointment was originally expected shortly after Schönborn's retirement in January. But now, as summer approaches, no successor has been announced. The delay is not just procedural. Some analysts suggest it reflects internal debate, or perhaps hesitation from Rome, in the face of mounting public concern. Glettler's possible promotion has sparked widespread reactions, and not all of them are celebratory. Independent Catholic outlets, traditionalist bloggers, and lay prayer groups have begun to organize, hoping to make their voices heard before a decision becomes final. It's a rare case where art, theology, and leadership intersect in ways that touch on the Church's very self-understanding. Is this delay a sign of reconsideration, or simply Vatican caution at work? Whatever the answer, Vienna waits. And so does the wider Catholic world. To fully grasp the weight of what's unfolding, it's important to understand the legacy left behind by Cardinal Christoph Schönborn. Schönborn was not a figure of extremes. Over his long tenure, he walked a careful line between tradition and adaptation, sometimes opening doors to modern expressions of faith, other times defending core doctrinal teachings. He was both a student of Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger and a pastoral leader known for his calm demeanor in turbulent times. During his leadership, the Archdiocese of Vienna became a microcosm of wider church tensions, balancing liturgical reform with preservation of sacred tradition, engaging culture while defending orthodoxy, and navigating a secular society without surrendering Catholic identity. One defining moment of controversy came in 2019, when Vienna's iconic St. Stephen's Cathedral hosted a concert that many Catholics viewed as theologically troubling. The event sparked backlash, most notably from Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano, who publicly condemned the spectacle. In response, lay Catholics organized a public rosary outside the cathedral, a rare sight in modern Austria. For many, this was not just about one concert. It was about who the Church was becoming. And so, as Schönborn quietly stepped down, he left behind a city where the battle for the soul of Catholic aesthetics and liturgy is still being waged. The next leader would not merely administer sacraments, he would define Vienna's spiritual direction for years to come. Bishop Hermann Glettler is not shy about his artistic vision. Over the past decade, he has become one of the most prominent defenders of integrating contemporary art into church settings. And he doesn't just tolerate it, he commissions it, celebrates it, and places it at the center of sacred worship. In one widely reported incident, a Lenten cloth designed under his oversight featured the image of a pig's heart sealed in plastic, intended as a modern reimagining of the Sacred Heart devotion. It was installed in a cathedral, directly in the visual field of worshippers. For some, it was a conversation starter. For others, a blasphemy. The piece cost an estimated $15,000 and drew sharp responses from Catholic commentators across Europe. Yet no formal rebuke was issued by church leadership. Instead, silence, a silence that many interpreted as tacit approval. In another moment, a stylized crucifix was displayed with the body of Christ inverted and abstracted, leading critics to question whether the symbol of redemption was being distorted. Glettler has explained these decisions in terms of engaging the modern mind and inviting spiritual reflection. In his view, churches should not become museums to the past, but dynamic spaces where culture and faith intersect. But this approach has raised serious theological questions. Is shock value an acceptable means of evangelization? Can sacred tradition be stretched this far without snapping? And if Glettler becomes the next Archbishop of Vienna, will such expressions become the norm rather than the exception? The questions surrounding Vienna's future don't exist in isolation. Across Europe, sacred spaces are being emptied, sold, or repurposed as church attendance continues to decline. One example frequently cited is St. Agnes Church in Berlin. Once a functioning Catholic parish, it was deconsecrated and eventually transformed into a modern art gallery. Today, the structure still bears the architectural marks of its sacred past, but its mission has changed entirely. Inside, one might now find abstract interpretations of crucifixion, or exhibits where Christian symbols are bent, reimagined, and reframed through a postmodern lens. Gallery owner Johann Koenig, who leased the space for 99 years, has defended the project as a way to preserve the building and engage Berlin's artistic culture. But for many Catholics, it's a symbol of surrender, a visible sign of what happens when the Church loses its grip on meaning. This backdrop matters because it contextualizes Bishop Glettler's vision. His artistic openness isn't just a local concern, it's part of a wider movement, one that seeks to redefine sacred space, often without clear theological boundaries. The risk, some argue, is not innovation. The risk is ambiguity. And in sacred matters, ambiguity can be spiritually dangerous. With churches like St. Agnes serving as cautionary tales, the faithful are asking a sobering question. What kind of church are we becoming? The Catholic Church has always understood the power of symbols. From the crucifix to the monstrance, from stained glass windows to sacred vestments, the Church has used beauty to point toward truth. But when symbols are distorted, their message shifts. This is the core concern many faithful now voice about Bishop Glettler's vision. When he placed a transparent chasuble on display during a liturgical event, critics questioned what was being communicated. Was the sacred being revealed or trivialized? Similarly, the display of a timepiece crafted from an upside-down corpus of Christ raised eyebrows not just for its aesthetics, but for its symbolism. Time and eternity, death and resurrection, these are mysteries that require reverence, not experimentation. Glettler insists that modern art can renew interest in the faith, especially among young people. And in fairness, some Catholic artists and scholars support his approach. They argue that the Church must engage with modern forms of expression or risk cultural irrelevance. But others respond with a simple question: at what cost? When sacred symbols become indistinguishable from abstract provocations, the risk isn't just confusion, it's desecration, however unintended. This is why the appointment of a new Archbishop of Vienna carries more than administrative weight. It carries symbolic and sacramental implications for the global Church. Any discussion of Bishop Glettler's rise must be framed within a wider ecclesial shift, the transition from the pontificate of Pope Francis to that of Pope Leo XIV. Under Pope Francis, emphasis was placed on synodality, accompaniment, and environmental advocacy. While these themes resonated with many, critics argued they often came at the expense of clarity in doctrine and liturgy. Pope Leo XIV, by contrast, ascended to the papacy as a former prefect for the dicastery for bishops, a man known for his deep involvement in episcopal appointments. He knows every major figure currently in play, including Glettler. This is what makes the current moment so pivotal. Pope Leo XIV is not merely inheriting a roster. He is actively shaping the next generation of bishops, and through them, the Church's direction. If Glettler is appointed to Vienna, it will signal not continuity with Francis, but a deliberate selection under Leo's authority. That alone is cause for reflection. It also raises a question: does Leo XIV support the vision of liturgical experimentation, or will he draw a line? The answer will not only define Vienna's future, it may set the tone for the global Church in the decade ahead. Beyond installations and cathedral events, Bishop Glettler has engaged the public in other ways, including his recent co-authored book with a non-Catholic religious leader titled "Don't Choose Hate, Choose Love." The message is one of interfaith unity and compassion, especially amid rising polarization. The book has been praised for its tone of reconciliation and shared humanity, but its reception hasn't been entirely warm. Theological critics have raised concerns that in promoting broad spiritual unity, the text glosses over doctrinal distinctiveness, including salvation through Christ, the role of the sacraments, and the Church's evangelizing mission. Moreover, Glettler's theological focus, particularly his emphasis on environmental stewardship, while admirable in intent, has raised questions about priorities. Are urgent spiritual matters, confession, catechesis, reverence, being sidelined for social messaging? One Lent, he oversaw the installation of an art piece portraying a pig's heart encased in plastic, meant to evoke a modern Sacred Heart. While he defended it as a creative gesture toward reflection, many Catholics found it deeply offensive. And once again, there was no formal rebuke from Church leadership, just silence. And silence, in ecclesial terms, often speaks louder than words. To understand the broader anxiety over Vienna's future, one must look not only to what is happening within the Archdiocese, but to what is happening across Europe, where sacred spaces are being repurposed, sold, or secularized. One of the most cited examples is the former Catholic Church of St. Agnes in Berlin. Once a place of worship, St. Agnes was deconsecrated due to dwindling attendance and economic strain. By 2012, it had been leased out for 99 years and was converted into a contemporary art gallery, the König Gallery. The altar was removed, pews were relocated. The building still retains its Gothic shape, but its purpose has shifted completely. Inside, you'll find abstract installations, digital exhibits, and at times, pieces that reinterpret religious symbols in provocative ways. One piece, critics noted, showed a crucified figure with a frog on the cross, intended supposedly to prompt reflection on absurdity and suffering. To some, this is artistic progress. To others, it is desecration in slow motion. This is the backdrop against which Bishop Glettler operates. He hasn't sold off cathedrals, but he has blurred the boundary between sacred space and modern art gallery. And some fear the line may eventually disappear altogether. The Church in Europe is shrinking in numbers, but the question remains, will it shrink also in sacred meaning? One of the clearest flashpoints came in 2019. On December 2nd of that year, Vienna's iconic St. Stephen's Cathedral hosted a concert that was widely criticized for blending religious symbols with themes considered theologically ambiguous, if not outright troubling. Cardinal Christoph Schönborn, then Archbishop of Vienna, had allowed the event. The backlash was immediate. Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano issued a public condemnation, calling it a mockery of sacred liturgy. Others saw it as the Church endorsing post-Christian performance. The most visible protest came from lay Catholics. Alexander Chugwell, a traditionalist activist, organized a public rosary outside the cathedral, a silent but pointed response. For many Catholics, the concert symbolized something far more serious than a single night of bad taste. It was a metaphor for a church adrift, still architecturally majestic, but spiritually confused. This incident is still discussed whenever Vienna's leadership is mentioned. It is a case study in how cultural engagement, if unmoored from theology, can alienate the very people the Church seeks to reach. Glettler's critics argue that his art installations are merely a continuation of the same mindset, one that tolerates ambiguity at the expense of clarity, beauty, and reverence. In recent years, Bishop Glettler's name has been associated with a broader trend sometimes called ecclesiastical modernism, a vision of the Church that favors aesthetic novelty, interfaith dialogue, and cultural openness. On the surface, these sound admirable, but critics are asking, where is the line between dialogue and dilution? In Glettler's book, Don't Choose Hate, Choose Love, co-authored with a religious leader from another faith, he proposes compassion as a foundational principle. But nowhere in the book is there a clear articulation of the Catholic understanding of truth, of Christ as the singular Redeemer, or the sacraments as the channels of divine grace. In liturgy, his emphasis on artistic shock value has also become symbolic of a deeper uncertainty. Is the sacred being used to elevate the soul, or is it being used as a platform for cultural statements? Many argue that in a world already disoriented by relativism, the Church must be the one place where clarity, beauty, and mystery remain undistorted. With the Archdiocese of Vienna still awaiting a permanent shepherd, the appointment will signal more than a personnel decision. It will represent the Church's stance on these questions. Is Vienna to become a citadel of renewal, or a monument to confusion? One of the most emblematic moments of Bishop Hermann Glettler's tenure came during Lent, the Church's most solemn season, when an installation under his oversight sparked a theological firestorm. Inside the Cathedral of Innsbruck, where Glettler serves as bishop, a modern artwork was displayed, a transparent cloth encasing a pig's heart. The intention, according to those involved, was to present a modern interpretation of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, a devotion deeply rooted in Catholic tradition, symbolizing Christ's divine love and his suffering for humanity. But for many faithful, the symbolism was not only unclear, it was deeply disturbing. A pig's heart, an unclean animal in both biblical and cultural understanding, used in place of the pierced heart of Christ, in the very season when Catholics are invited to meditate on the Passion, the controversy quickly spread. The installation was estimated to have cost around $15,000 and was exhibited in multiple church spaces under Glettler's guidance. To his supporters, this was bold artistic engagement. To critics, it was an affront, not just to artistic sensibilities, but to the theological core of the faith. The Church has always used beauty to draw people toward the mystery of God. But beauty, in the Catholic sense, is not simply subjective or provocative. It is ordered, transcendent, and rooted in truth. The pig's heart installation, many argued, didn't elevate the mind toward God. It clouded the sacred in layers of irony and confusion. Glettler's openness to interreligious collaboration has also drawn mixed reactions. In recent years, he co-authored a book titled Don't Choose Hate, Choose Love, with a leader from a different religious tradition. The message was universal compassion, peace-building, and reconciliation, all values Catholics can affirm. But what was missing, critics argue, was the uniquely Catholic witness. There was no mention of the gospel, no reference to the salvific mission of Christ, no call to conversion, not even an acknowledgement of the differences that give interfaith dialogue its depth. Instead, the text presented a flattened spirituality, one that placed emotional harmony above theological clarity. This is part of what some theologians have termed pastoral drift, when the Church's desire to be welcoming leads to the softening of truths that were once proclaimed with conviction. It's not that dialogue is wrong, far from it. The Church has always sought engagement with the world, but engagement must never come at the cost of its mission, to proclaim the truth of Jesus Christ, in season and out. As such, Glettler's elevation to Vienna, one of the most visible sees in the Catholic world, would send a powerful signal that this form of leadership is not only accepted but promoted. Whether that message inspires or alarms will depend greatly on what Catholics believe the Church is for and where she is headed. As discussions intensify over Vienna's future, attention has turned to one man above all, Pope Leo XIV. Before his election as pontiff, Pope Leo served as the prefect for the dicastery for bishops, the Vatican body responsible for evaluating candidates for episcopal appointments. In that role, he became intimately familiar with nearly every high-ranking clergyman in the global church, including Bishop Glettler. This raises an unavoidable reality. Any appointment made under this pontificate is not an accident. It is a deliberate decision. The delay in Vienna's appointment, while officially unexplained, has fueled speculation. Some see it as a sign of division among Vatican advisors. Others suggest it is a matter of optics, waiting until controversy cools before making a final announcement. Whatever the case, it's clear that the choice will reflect the Pope's own vision for the Church. Will that vision prioritize tradition and theological clarity, or will it lean toward cultural engagement and aesthetic experimentation? The Church in Austria has long stood at the intersection of faith and modernity. From the Enlightenment to the Nazi era, from post-war rebuilding to today's ideological battles, Vienna has been a mirror of Europe's Catholic soul. What it reflects next will depend on the shepherd chosen to lead it. The Cathedral of St. Stephen. In Vienna, like so many grand European churches, is more than a building. It's a living memory of faith. It has survived fire, war, secular regimes, and the cold drift of modernity. Yet its greatest test may not be external, but internal. Throughout the years, this sacred space has been both preserved and challenged by the actions of its caretakers. In 2019, a concert held inside the cathedral triggered widespread controversy. Orchestrated under the leadership of Cardinal Christoph Schönborn, the event featured elements that were, according to critics, theologically ambiguous, even irreverent. Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano, a former papal nuncio, publicly condemned the concert. He called it a tragic example of how modern liturgy and art can diverge from authentic Catholic worship. In response, Alexander Chugwell, a lay Catholic known for his activism, organized a public rosary outside the cathedral, a visible protest and spiritual intercession for what many viewed as a desecration. These moments are not isolated. They form a pattern, one that has caused many in Vienna and beyond to question whether the sacred is still treated as sacred or as something to be reinterpreted endlessly in the name of progress. It is in this context that the appointment of the next archbishop takes on more than administrative weight. It becomes a test, a moment of judgment. Will the Church in Vienna return to reverence, or will it continue the slow drift into artistic provocation and theological ambiguity? Some voices within the Catholic world have begun describing this moment not just as a transition, but as a spiritual turning point. A new term has quietly emerged in Catholic commentary: ecclesiastical modernism, the tendency to subordinate sacred tradition to the tastes and ideologies of the contemporary world. Under this model, sacred art becomes a platform for political or emotional statements, rather than a channel for divine beauty. Liturgy becomes less about sacrifice and more about performance. Dialogue with the world takes precedence over fidelity to revealed truth. Bishop Glettler, in the eyes of his critics, has become a symbol of this trend. His co-authored book, his liturgical innovations, his endorsement of contemporary installations within cathedrals, all are seen as part of a broader movement to reshape the Church from the inside out. Supporters argue that this is evangelization, meeting people where they are, speaking the language of modernity. But opponents warn that in trying to be relevant, the Church risks becoming irrelevant, no longer distinct, no longer divine, no longer a sanctuary. This is not merely a question of taste or personal preference. It is a question of truth. What is the Church for? Why do we build cathedrals that echo with centuries of chant and incense? Why do we hold fast to sacraments, creeds, and sacred tradition? The appointment in Vienna is not just about one man. It's about the soul of the Church, in a continent where faith has grown cold, and where clarity, not confusion, is needed more than ever. In light of all these developments, Catholics across Austria and beyond are asking a simple but urgent question: where is our Church going? They are not asking this with cynicism or hostility, but with hearts burdened by love. Love for the Eucharist, love for the beauty of their churches, love for the truth passed down through generations. For many, the controversy around Bishop Glettler is not about condemning a man, but about protecting a sacred inheritance. Sacred art is not a tool for social commentary. The altar is not a stage, the priest is not a performer. These things matter, not just aesthetically, but theologically. When a cathedral is filled with confusion, it becomes harder to hear the still, small voice of God. And so, many Catholics are doing the only thing they can do in such moments. They are praying for Pope Leo XIV, praying for Vienna, praying that, in this time of uncertainty, the Holy Spirit will raise up leaders who are humble, holy, and fearless in defending what is sacred. Because what happens in Vienna will not stay in Vienna. It will echo across Europe and through the body of Christ worldwide. Across Europe, the Church faces a troubling pattern, the slow loss of sacred spaces, not merely through destruction or neglect, but through transformation into something unrecognizable. One of the clearest examples is the former Church of St. Agnes in Berlin. Once a functioning parish, it was relinquished in 2004 due to dwindling attendance and financial strain. Its altars, pews, and liturgical furnishings were carefully removed, transferred to other churches still in operation. But the building itself? It did not remain a church. Instead, it became a contemporary art gallery, the König Galerie, under a 99-year lease secured by gallerist Johann König. Within these once sacred walls, exhibitions are now held that reimagine, distort, or challenge traditional Christian imagery. One artwork portrayed a crucified figure with its body turned toward the cross in abstract symbolism. Another replaced Christ with a frog affixed to the crucifix. Critics saw these as degrading. Supporters called them dialogues with tradition. What's undeniable is that the former sanctuary of the Lord has become a showcase for modern reinterpretations that many believers find irreverent at best, sacrilegious at worst. And while Berlin is not Vienna, the trajectory of repurposing sacred spaces into galleries and cultural venues is spreading. It's often justified as a response to cultural evolution or artistic outreach, but the question must be asked, outreach to whom and at what cost? The case of St. Agnes serves as a warning. When churches are no longer protected as sanctuaries, when their holiness is diluted or compromised, they become vulnerable to redefinition. They stop being places of prayer and become places of performance. And once that happens, the line between holy and secular blurs, perhaps irreversibly. One of the most haunting aspects of this unfolding narrative is not what has been said, but what has been left unsaid. In the face of controversial installations, provocative performances, and the transformation of churches into cultural showcases, silence from ecclesial authorities has too often been the norm. When the Lenten cloth in Innsbruck featured a pig's heart encased in transparent material, meant to represent the Sacred Heart of Jesus, there was no Vatican response, no public rebuke, no clear guidance issued to the faithful. $15,000 was reportedly spent on the production and display of that series of artworks. Many Catholics, especially in Austria, were left stunned. Some were deeply wounded, but official silence prevailed. This silence is not merely administrative, it is pastoral. When the faithful cry out in confusion or concern and are met with nothing but silence, it becomes harder for them to trust. The Church teaches that beauty is a path to God, that the sacred is to be reverenced, that worship is not a canvas for experimentation, but a foretaste of heaven. When leadership fails to defend those truths publicly, especially in moments of crisis, the Church risks appearing complicit in her own desacralization. And so, the faithful are not asking for censorship. They are not demanding artistic uniformity. What they are asking for, what they are pleading for, is clarity, guidance, shepherds who will protect the sacred with courage and conviction. Because the silence is not neutral, it echoes. And in its absence, confusion speaks louder. The Archdiocese of Vienna now finds itself at a cultural and theological crossroads. The decisions made in the coming months will not simply appoint a new administrator. They will either reinforce a trend or offer course correction. The future of Vienna, and by extension, the vision of Catholicism in Europe, will hinge on whether the sacred is once again placed at the center, or whether it continues to be subjugated to the whims of modern expression and aesthetic experimentation. Bishop Hermann Glettler's leadership style has provoked more than mere aesthetic debate. His installation of provocative artworks in sacred spaces, including transparent chasubles and reinterpretations of the crucifixion, have left many questioning whether his vision aligns with the historic role of a bishop to safeguard the deposit of faith, not to reinterpret it through cultural abstraction. His defenders point to his pastoral outreach, his focus on environmental issues, and his openness to interreligious dialogue. But critics argue that these initiatives, while well-intentioned, have often come at the expense of clarity in doctrine and reverence in worship. And so, the debate over Glettler's possible elevation is not just about one man. It's about whether the Church will continue to drift toward modernist reinterpretations of its mission, or return to the roots of tradition, clarity, and the transcendent. Will Vienna become a beacon of sacred renewal, or a symbol of sacred dilution?